I'd like to welcome everyone from their very busy schedules to joining us today to learn a little bit more about a very young gemstone, which is Tanzanite. The We have a number of speakers, and I'll introduce them as we come up to them.
No, I gotta get
Mute the microphone, please. Mute the microphone, please. Thank you. The technology of this is really simple. It's just a little frustrating sometimes. Anyway, this is a gem that's only been around since, or been known of since 1967. However, the mineral family that it is a member of, which is zoisite, has been known since as a mineral since the 1800s. So sometime in around 1967, some Maasai tribesmen, herdsmen, discovered some bright blue crystals on the surface somewhere near Merelani in Tanzania. And they thought it might be of interest, so they brought it to the attention of a local miner named Manuel de Souza.
no.
Please mute. Manuel de Souza, and Manuel de Souza started mining. And from that point onwards, up until the point when the government of Tanzania nationalized the mining of Tanzanite, over 20 million carats were mined. So in its beginnings, it was thought that we needed an international and well-known company to help market it. So Tiffany's was brought in, and sometime in around 1968, 69, Tiffany's brought it in. Originally, it was blue zoisite, which didn't sound very good. It almost sounded like blue suicide. So I decided to give it a much more interesting name and named it Tanzanite after the place of its unique origins. And as far as I know, unless someone can correct me, I don't know of anywhere else in the world where we get Tanzanite. And I'd love to stand corrected if I'm incorrect in that regard. At this point in time, there's some thoughts that because of the large numbers of carats of Tanzanite that are leaving the country every year, that there may only be another 30 years left in the lifetime of reserves of gem Tanzanite. So this is something that's a very special stone, young in its history and unique in its color and colors. We will soon find out. So we're sort of taking this in a group of people going to be presenting and talking about different aspects of Tanzanite. The first would be a young couple by the name of Quentin and Willow White, up near Ottawa, Ottawa, Canada. And Colonel Quentin White is in the mineral world is very well known as the author of the book on minerals. And he was with the RCAF for 37 years, graduated from Queen's, Carleton, and Concordia universities, and basically began writing about minerals in 1966. And written over 185 articles and reviews on mineral related subjects. He began to specialize in mineral photomicrography in 1973 and has given more than 190 presentations to groups across North America, England, Belgium, Italy, Switzerland, Tanzania, and New Zealand. And he was inducted into the Micromatters Hall of Fame in 1990 and definitely worthy of such. He now coordinates that same organization in Baltimore, Maryland. And it's interesting, it used to be called the Baltimore Symposium, later became the Dissertel Symposium, and now I guess it's been the Micromatters Hall of Fame. And an annual gathering is also involved, heads an annual gathering every year in microscopic minerals in Rochester, New York. And the mineral quintonite was named in his honor in 1992. Very few of us have that honor. And his good lady wife, Willow, is perhaps best known as editor of the Canadian Gemologist, the official quarterly for the Canadian Gemological Association. But after 25 years as editor, she's moved to editor emeritus. Now, Willow graduated from the University of Toronto as an organic chemist and then took up the study of gemstones in 1967. Her first practical work in gems was in association with the renowned Paul Desautel at Smithsonian, and she examined verified and cataloged the gemstones in the U.S. National Collection. And from that, she gained a wealth of experience in gems. On her return to Canada in 1975, she was sought out by the National Museum of Natural Sciences, now called the Canadian Museum of Nature in Ottawa, and has been associated with that ever since. She's now a research associate in gemology. Somebody needs to mute. Somebody needs to mute. Hearing music. Thank you, whoever that was. Nope, it's still there. I love technology. Thank you. Woo! Okay, so she's now research associate in gemology at the National Museum, and she's also done a number of articles in the gem world. The Canadian gemologist, her article on rare gemstones checklist Canadian gemologists is under international praise. So, and both these people bring great knowledge and experience, and they were going to be sharing with us a presentation regarding the origins and mining area in Tanzania. And I'd like you to give a welcome, not auditory, of course, but just a warm welcome to Quinton and Willow White. And they'll be screen sharing.
There we go.
We're now unmuted. Hello.
We're now unmuted.
Yeah.
Small question just to see if we can share screen.
You haven't put it up yet. You haven't opened it yet.
Shush.
Open your PowerPoint.
Shush.
Yeah, you want to move that?
And there we are.
Okay.
I usually start with this as a first slide for the Americans because I like to say that's a Z,
Yes.
but it also helps to focus in.
Okay.
All right, this will be a short look at the Tanzanite 1 mine. And for those of you who don't know, that's Kilimanjaro over there in the back. A lot of people think that Kilimanjaro is in Kenya. It's not, it's in Tanzania.
Yeah. The 31st International Gemological Conference was held in Arusha, Tanzania, and in 2009. So this is historic. And I was attending as the Canadian delegate.
Yeah.
So the organized by Dr. John Saul, it was held in Arusha, partly because of the location nearby the Tanzanite 1 mine, which of course we visited,
yeah,
along with many others, but today it's the Tanzanite 1 mine.
Yeah. Just to show that it is international, this gentleman is a Russian, this one's a Sri Lankan, and I think that's Taite Sun from Singapore. But it's quite a group. And of course, this is Dr. John Saul. And Tanzanite was originally, as Ray said, pushed by Manuel de Souza, but he gave some to Dr. Saul, who also discovered the John Saul ruby mine. And John Saul happened to have a father, Hyman Saul, who was vice president of Saks Fifth Avenue in New York. Hyman Saul consulted the GIA, who made the identification of blue zoisite with traces of vanadium as the chromophore. And a lot of people were working on this. The British were also working on it. So it was quite a number of people who were working to identify this stuff. But strangely enough, Saks did not want to market the blue stone. So Hyman Saul took it to Tiffany's. And as Ray said, the rest is history. Now, I mentioned Dr. Saul a little more because he's currently living in France, having carried on his work in East Africa. In fact, his son is a dealer in Tanzanite in Arusha. But the main thing is to mention this book here, the book Geologist Speculates, which was written by Dr. Saul. And I'm mentioning that because some of the stuff I'll be talking about actually comes from this book. It's a very interesting book, well worth reading, and has a lot of geologists all upset one way or another, which is a good thing. Anyway, let's have a look at Tanzania. The volcano Kilimanjaro is up here in the corner, and it is less than 3 million years old. On the other hand, the Marilani Hills, which host the Tanzanite 1 mine, are non-volcanic, and they are 500 to 650 million years old. That's quite a spread in age between the two. The two sites are about 69 kilometers apart. And in fact, if you go to the mine and take a picture, there's Kilimanjaro as seen from the mine back in 2009. There's a lot of smog down below, but the upper air is clear. All right. As Ray said, the government, there was a lot of fuss going on until the government got involved and decided to split things up. So they split the area into 4 blocks, A, B, C, and D, as you can see here. And they gave the Tanzanite 1 section to a company that was mining graphite in that area. Block C is the biggest one. And this is it here. And as I'll show you later, the veins run more or less this way. The processing plant is not at the mine, it's further away up this direction. So there's the mine from good old Google. And there are some interesting things. They have an airport or runway then. These, Block D and Block B, as you can see on the ends, are occupied by the native diggers. And they have grown up enormously since we were there. But we're only interested in Block C. And the tough thing about Block C is, first of all, the government wants $50 per person to get in just between the government fence, which is at the top, and the company fence, which is a little bit further away. $50 a person to get in there. And that's not the really tough bit. The really tough bit comes when you try to leave. Because at that time, I don't know what it's like now, but at that time, Tanzania was a really corrupt place. When you try to leave, the guards stop you. Now, when we went in Land Rovers, 6 to a Land Rover with a native driver. And they looked and said, oh, yes, you got 6 people, you got 6 sets of documents saying you can get in, that's fine. When you go out, they say, oh, there's a problem here. And you say, what? We got 6 people, we got 6 documents. They say, oh, no, there's 7 of you in the car. Yeah, but this guy's a native. He's a native driver. Oh, but that doesn't count. The government still wants the $50 for somebody going into the mine. And it cost John Saul, who was leading the little group, $200 to get us out of the mine. Never mind the problem coming in. The mine owners, of course, they also like a little security. This is Cossack, and his past lifts him as management. And he certainly was an observer. I'll say that much for him. Anyway, this is where John Saul's book comes in and why I suggest you read it. Way back, 580 some million years ago, East Gondwana is crashing into West Gondwana. And East Gondwana is subducting under West Gondwana. So you've got a massive east-west squish here between these 2 cratons that are pushing up a vast mountain range right here. It's a very big mountain range, 8,000 kilometers long and 1,000 kilometers wide. So you've got enormous heat crushing down on that area, as well as the force crushing in from the sides, as well as the squeeze. And of course, because it's subductive, you're getting frictional heat building in there too. On top of that, East Gondwana is rotating. So you not only have vertical pressure from gravity and the squeeze pressure from the sides, you've got shear in the middle on top of the heat. And when you add all of that up together, it causes an awful lot of fuss underneath. Actually, when these mountains eventually eroded away, and it took them 250 million years to do that, there was enough sediment created to cover the United States to a depth of 10 kilometers. But this is what happens underneath all of that squeeze and push and heat and shove. you get a structure that looks like this, which is folding in one direction and then folding in another direction. And in this direction right here, you get Tanzanite. It's immensely complicated, and some geologists, they call this an egg carton structure. If you take a cross cut across the mine, this is what it looks like. Here's some of those folds. Here and here. And all the in-between stuff. You got garnet, silver, nice here, and you've got dolomite there. And you've got some shear zones because of the shearing. And the Tanzanite occurs in these zones here, in the red ones. But there's something else there you should pay attention to. And that's there. Graphite, 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 and graphite. There, by the way, is the formula. You've got grossular garnet plus water plus carbon dioxide that gives you the Tanzanite plus quartz and calcite. And the carbon dioxide comes basically from the subductive East Gondwana, which is scraping all of the life forms that were living there underneath and down. If you want to look at some of the garnet gneiss on the surface, that's what it looks like, a little sun-baked. That screwdriver is roughly 1 inch in diameter. To go back to the mine itself and plan view, the main shaft was originally started was the JW zone, and the JW zone is right here. They've had all these other shafts in the meantime. Now, look at it from the side, and it's rather interesting because the mine itself, of course, has started going down into regular mining routines, and they're down 800 meters now. This is the JW shaft here. That's the one we went down. These may or may not, I can't guarantee it. I don't know whether they're native miners trickling into the edge of the C zone or not. But the mine is certainly keeping an eye on what's happening down here. And if you look at it once again from our dear friends Google, the start of the shaft for JW is here. And I'd like you to pay attention to that. That little thing over there is the Officers Club swimming pool. And I'll come back to it just at the end of our talk. This is the Officers Club, that's their swimming pool. And the JW vein goes that way. Now, we thought it took a long time to get permission, not just from the government, but from the Tanzanite 1 mine to go there. And we thought they were just being very security conscious and careful. Turns out they weren't. What happened was they said, oh, these people want to come and have a look at our mine, and we're not using that part. We could probably tart it up for tourists. We could make it a tourist attraction. So they held us up until they had tarted it up. So when you go down there, first of all, you see a very odd entrance to this shaft. I don't know, not being a geologist, whether you can call that a hanging wall or not, but it's certainly hanging over us. These bags, by the way, when they were mining there originally, they were mining mostly by hand. And the miners would pick up the material, stuff it in these bags, and whip it up to the head frame, which is up here at the back, and it would be taken off from there. However, inside the shaft, and because this is a good commercial operation, they've got it bolted and looked after, so it may be hanging, but it's hanging well. Here's what they were doing for tourists. They were putting red paint on the walls up here so that you could say, oh yeah, that's what they call a boudin. I'm pronouncing it boudin, the French method, because it's a French word meaning black pudding, because they are sort of pudding shaped. But the miners thought, hey, we ought to tart this up. So they did with red paint. The green here is the grossular garnet. And there's a lot of grossular garnet in the mine. And you've got calcite and quartz and tanzanite, which has been removed from this one, obviously. If you look across the way in the other direction, there's one that hasn't been tardied up, although the tanzanite's still gone. But you can see a better idea there, the green garnet, which is falling like sand down here below. It's very, very fragile stuff. But look at the layering. This is the result of all of that compression and squish and bashing around here that you saw in the folding right there in the wall. It's very colorful, very clear. In fact, if you look at this, which is behind Willow, Willow's standing in an escape shaft. And once again, that's critical to the talk. But look at the banding, the compression, the squeeze that went on with these rocks. How twisted and bent and shoved around they are. There was an enormous amount of energy that was being exerted gravitationally on these things. She's holding a chunk of garnet in her hand, but it wasn't a solid chunk. It's a combined mass of garnet sand. We didn't bring it back. So if you look at that, you've got all these fancy, beautifully colored layers. But once you blast it out, as they do nowadays, it looks like that. Remember that graphite I told you to notice? That's where it is. There's the graphite. It used to be a graphite mine before they discovered tanzanite, and they could still get an awful lot of graphite out of that. Now, it's biogenic graphite. Remember I said that East Gondwana was subducting under and providing the living stuff that was on its surface or on the sea just as its edge? This is it. This is graphite that used to be alive, and it's now a little crystal buried deep in the rocks. So is that one. And I know it's biogenic graphite because Dr. Jazak told me it was, and he's the one who's been working on it. However, if you look at it, the others were fancy electron shots. This, if you look at this one, there's a real graphite picture right there, very nice crystal. But the interesting part about this is that's marilanite, the new mineral that was discovered in the Tanzanite one at Marilani. Molybdenum, lead, vanadium, antimony sulfide. That's quite a mouthful. But then again, it's quite a mineral. And one of the other things you get is pyrite. This is another one of our members. He's a Ukrainian. There's a Russian. There's a Thai, and this gentleman's French. The other two are from the mine. But these pyrite crystals are rather interesting because I don't know if Alan Hart's with us, but shortly after we were there, we were visiting him at the Natural History Museum. And he was very proud of a pyrite crystal like that he just got from this area. And I had to say, Alan, that's a nice crystal, but I should tell you that in a Tanzanite mine, pyrite crystals are for doorstops. And there's one right there being used as a doorstop. They make very good doorstops. That thing's the size of a large orange or a small grapefruit. And obviously worth a lot to collectors. But there, it's a doorstop. However, let's go back to the mine itself. The stuff is not treated at the mine. It's loaded into trucks, taken up to the processing plant. And here they are at the processing plant, loading it on to the conveyor belt. I think that this gentleman is supposed to be checking these ones to make sure they don't swipe any crystals, but he's not paying a lot of attention to it. Now, the ore, it's quite a long line. It goes through many ups and downs, and they dump off a lot of stuff at the side. You come to the end, and here's a whole group looking to see what happens at the end. Not a great deal, except they've got a huge magnetic separator. And the reason for that, I believe, is they separate the gemstones out by using some sort of flotation process. And they use a magnetic material to separate it. So this drum just recovers the magnetic flotation stuff. It doesn't touch the gemstones at all. The gemstones are handled in here, in this little area down there. And there they are.
Oh, yes, now we get to the gemstones. There is a display room in the company's office building. And we saw this wonderful thing in its own particular custom-made box, the largest Tanzanite crystal then known until that time, 22 centimeters long and 3.3 kilograms in weight. And then look at this beautiful big crystal. This is another beautiful big blue crystal. And yeah, I was a little bit worried about holding it. We were very pleased that we were allowed to even touch these specimens. So that's yeah, was quite a thrill. And just to show a few of the pictures we took of illustrating the Tanzanite, of course, it's trichroic, being orthorhombic, and these colors and different crystals that we were looking at, yellow, and then this violet, and then this intense blue. This is another view of the crystal I was actually holding before.
Yeah. Those two, just to pop in here, those two pictures before, the yellow and the violet, that's the same crystal, just turned a little bit.
Yeah, so this is just, and they had crystals in matrix, these lovely blue and white calcite. And the colors vary and the sizes vary, maybe up to 10 centimeters. And the blues, of course. And there again, we have the inch for scale. And this little grayish yellow one was quite neat because it has this little pyrite crystal decorating the top of it. That was kind of neat. And these are some of the newly washed rough pieces showing the range of colors. Now, of course, most of the gem material is heat treated to about 500 degrees centigrade. And to get rid of the yellow component and make a more attractive gem. Fortunately, that is a permanent color change. But these are some examples of faceted stones of the untreated material. And just look at the wide range of colors that they have produced. It's just, you know, great to have variety. So grading, of course, for color is an important part of the gem trade. And this is a scale they were using. And of course, the darker violetish blue material, more valuable than the paler. And the other is more bluish violet. So now this, you just have to stand back in awe because wonderful faceted stone, 66 carats. And they were only asking $6,000 a carat for it. I have no idea what it would be worth today. And yes, this one's smaller, 28 carats, only $600 a carat. So what are you going to do? You know, we enjoyed it. We enjoyed it immensely.
That takes us back to the end and to the officers club and their swimming pool.
I think it was management, you know, not military.
No, yes, yeah, that's right. Well, okay. These are our people, I think. Not they don't have that many folks looking after the mine. But the reason I put this in, and it's a kind of a sad one in many ways, because it brings us back to the collectors who use these stones. If you look over that wall there, you're looking down into the section of the mine. And if you look at that, this is back then. It has now grown up enormously. There are a lot more roads, a lot more people filled in. You can see the dumps that the local natives have dug, just squirreled away. But what makes it sad is the fact that it's a bowl. And just before we got there, a year or so, they had an enormous rainstorm that filled that bowl and drowned 90 of the native workers. They didn't have escape shafts. So when you buy specimens of Tanzanite or the associated minerals, you might just give a thought to the folks who are scrabbling in the dirt trying to make a living. And that's us for the end.
That's us. Thank you.
Yes. And now, if I can find my way out to stop screen sharing, I shall do that. And there we are.
There we are.
Thank you very much, Quentin and Willow. That was very interesting insight into, and you did steal some of the thunder from a few of the people that are following you, but that's okay. You can't,
Well,
you gave us
we
a
have-
rather thorough and interesting overview. Now I'd like to open up the floor for a few minutes to see if anybody have any direct questions about the mine location or the mineralogy of the mining of Tanzanite. And you can unmute and ask it, and Quentin and Willow will try and answer it. The silence is thunderous.
Mhm. Well, I guess we said it
Guess
all.
that- I guess that says you did a really good, thorough job of covering the field. Well, thanks very much, Quentin and Willow. I appreciate the work you put into that. Our next presenter is, could you do it again then? Thanks. Thank you. Our next presenter is a fellow who's really well known in the gem world. And I've sort of, in my own mind, coined him the Tanzan King. He may not accept that title of royalty, but he's been around for a while and is certainly highly associated with Tanzanites, to the point that, as far as I understand, he's probably treated more than 5,000 stones of Tanzanite. When you consider how many stones are out there, that's a lot. That's a lot of rough. His name is Steve Ulatowski. Steve is the owner and proprietor of New Era Gems. Now, we're a non-partisan, but you can't ignore someone's business when they're presenting. And I quite frankly am very impressed with the work that Steve has done with gems, and in particular with the area of Tanzanites. Now, just to give you a little kind of a background, and he was very modest about his background. Steve started cutting when he was 9 years old and was offered a job at Shales Gems at age 13. This guy's, getting right in there, child labor and all. When he was 19, he worked at Fire Mountain Gems and then started his own business when he was 20. And I think he's a little older than that now. So, he's been at it a while. He traveled to Africa for the first time in his own experience in 1979 and had no chance but to fall in love with all the gems that he discovered there, and especially Tanzanite. So with that as a very brief background, Steve, I wanted to ask him a couple of questions. We're going to do it sort of like an interview to make it a little easier. Steve's actually right now in Tucson, where I'd like to be, and living the life and having a very busy day. I appreciate the time that he's taken off to share his knowledge with us today. Now, just a quick question, Steve. Could you please share with us from your knowledge, what percentage of the rough that comes out of Tanzanite rough is actually blue?
Okay, so actually, I looked at a parcel recently. Okay, and actually weighed out the natural blue, and the brownish, what they call diesel color, there, and it's 2.5%. What I came up with on this natural blue. The rest of it's the diesel color, dark brown, light brown. You even get a very, very small percentage of pink, but that's, I would say that's less than 1%. You get pink color.
Wow, that's pretty tiny. So
yeah,
this is one of those cases where when you look at the gemological report and it says treatments, it's not a negative, it's actually a positive, because without treatments, we don't have the blue we want. And this guy here is the king of treatments. So what percentage then, that means that roughly 98% of the rough that you handle needs treatment?
Yeah, it does need treatment. And I want to throw in there that it's not a wise idea to heat rough, which is why, when you heat rough, generally it will crack on heating. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it's the different, the temperature ranging from the rough shape. Whereas if you heat a clean cut gem, for some reason you don't get any cracking as long as the gem is clean. So that's why we prefer to heat them after cutting.
All right.
So, but Yeah, and some people actually these days, it's really interesting is that some people prefer to have the natural diesel colored material, not that high a percentage. Most want the purple blue color.
Yeah, when I was living out east, my gemologist called me up one day and said, "Hey Ray, you interested in getting some Tanzanite rough?" And I said, "Okay, I've never seen any." So I went down, and there in his office was a ferry captain from Lake Tanganyika, and he had this ugly looking piece of rock, and he said,
Yeah.
this is Tanzanite." I said, "No, that can't be Tanzanite." He said, "Yeah." I said, so in the end, I got really lucky, and I bought the rough for $35, which is all he wanted, because it is someone who's trying to escape political and for asylum had used it to pay for their ferry trip. So that was my introduction to the fact that Tanzanite just doesn't look that great if it's not treated for the most part. So can you share with us, if you wouldn't mind, some of the methods and the temperatures that are used in
Well,
treatment?
we use a programmable oven, and we bring it up to I don't know why this seems to be the best temperature, 1,040 degrees. That's just from many. You said 10,000 pieces. I would say it's more like 100,000 pieces of Tanzanite we've heated. Incredible amount. And so we do that at about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, per minute. We program the oven. We put it in a dry casting investment that insulates it, so the temperature doesn't rise too quickly. It doesn't cool too quickly. So
You're breaking up. You're breaking up, Steve. I don't know what's
So
happening.
okay, we heat it about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit per minute. Okay, reaching the temperature about 1,040 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 560 degrees centigrade. And we do that over a period of, well, 2.5 degrees a minute. Once we reach temperature, we leave it there for an hour and let it cool down overnight. Usually I start that in the day, by the evening, and then let it cool down. Cooling down usually takes another 8 hours. So it's approximately 16 hours from start to finish of processing it to get the blue color. And you'll always get a change of color unless there's a component of green for some reason. And then the green seems to stay the same. With the diesel color change, the pink, you have a really vibrant pink also. We've heated that by accident. And from the pink, you'll get a kind of a dirty looking purple color. So it's not very attractive. So you never want to heat treat the pinks.
So what is the percentage of success for treatments? Do they all change color properly, or is there a loss factor there somewhere?
Pretty much if you change the diesel color in your mind, visualize it. If it's a good diesel color, dark color, it'll be a dark, purple blue color when you heat it. If it starts off a very light color, greenish gray color, you're going to end up with a very pale greenish purple. It's not so attractive, in my opinion. But the percentage that comes out good, the percentage that comes out great, I would say is maybe 30%. That comes out nice, probably about let's say 50% comes out quite attractive and nice, and the remainder is not. Well, some people like it. We call it Mardi Gras color. You got a mix of green and purple and different colors, but not. I'm not a fan.
So is the environment that you're heating it in, is it reducing or oxidizing in any special way?
Yeah, there's no reducing. It doesn't do anything other than insulate it. And some people have done some experiments with oxygen reducing or whatever. It doesn't change anything. In fact, we've even tried irradiation to see if that would do anything. Absolutely doesn't affect it at all. So we thought maybe we could deepen the color of some lighter color pieces, but radiation does not do that.
So you were talking earlier about damage happening when you're doing rough versus cut stones. I imagine you still do a lot of rough though, don't you?
We don't heat treat much rough. I just you know, it's too valuable material. And I would say the percentage, if you do it very, very carefully, you'll only lose 20%.
So there is
But
damage involved.
there's damage when you heat the rough. When you heat the cut stones, we haven't lost a stone with a clean stone that we heat a clean stone. I can't remember the last stone that we've lost that's cracked on us by heating a cut stone. So it just makes more sense. You cut the stone. I think Clemens is going to talk about orientation later, so I won't get into that. But my belief also, people ask me, well, how can I tell the orientation of the stone when it's still the diesel color? And I say, well, you want more saturation, cut the biggest stone you can get, and by the size, you'll get more saturation.
All right. So it's been my understanding from a couple of people that because of the government's involvement in the mining in Tanzania, it's very difficult to purchase Tanzanites in and take out of at Tanzania. Is there a methodology for this? Is this
Regulations, and it seems like the government likes to change the regulations to suit. I don't know. It confuses me, quite honestly. For a while there, they banned the export of every form of Tanzanite, and then they allowed cut stones. This is just a few months back. Then they allowed, I think it was July of last year. Then they allowed the export of cut stones, and they re-allowed the export of crystals, and then now they allow under 2 grams can be exported in rough, but it has to be exported from Marilani, sealed in Marilani. You can't just but that may change too. It could have changed yesterday again. But so you're allowed to export. Years ago, now you'll see larger than 2 gram material of rough. We have larger than 2 gram. Years ago, you were allowed to export over 2 gram. They had site holders, they had auctions where they allowed people to export rough. A lot of the site holders bought large quantity of material in Hong Kong and India. So not all the Tanzanite rough available is coming from Tanzanite mines right now. Under 2 grams you can get. It's difficult to export, but a lot of paperwork, but you can do that. But the larger stuff has got to be procured by site holders bought kilos and kilos of material when prices were more reasonable too, and now they're liquidating some of their stocks. So also, I want to talk about actually something now. We buy a lot of crystals, and we heat 90% of our crystals because the brown color is not so attractive. And when I'm evaluating a crystal, I look at the amount of cutting material oftentimes, and can I get enough cutting rough out of it if I need to? If the crystal doesn't sell, is there enough cutting rough in there to get the same value, get the value of what I paid for it at least? So that's also another way that you get rough material.
Wow. So how many thousands of carats of Tanzanites do you think you've treated so far?
In crystals and rough, I would say, I don't know about carats, but it's got to be at least 500 kilos.
How many?
500 kilos.
Whoa, oh, really? That's a lot of Tanzanite.
My little oven it's been worked out.
Okay, so obviously, since you market a lot of this, you're involved in grading, and and Willow did give us a little window into some of the grading of the cut stones. Did you have any insights you'd share with us in terms of buying rough?
Buying rough, there's what we call deluxe color. Okay, that's the name that another company came up with, right? We evaluated. There's a depth of color. It's kind of hard to explain without. I mean, I wish I had some pictures I could show you, right? So.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, let me see if we can find. I'll show you some really incredible rough. We're going to pull that up here. Get my assistant here. because I'm not very good at this stuff. So let's see if we can pull up. Yeah, can you see that picture there? Is that coming up? Nope, it's okay.
It was.
Okay, there. So this is the most valuable rough that we can get hold of. And I've got with site holders and other people that I buy from, I've got a standing order if they have any of the natural blue. This is all natural. This has not been heated. So this to me is the most valuable because people prefer unheated material, natural material, and it's rarity. And actually, the funny thing is, it doesn't cut the darkest material, but it cuts the more bright material, more like cashmere, sapphire blue, and those, the colors that are very, very vibrant. Say, so I'll show you a parcel here. See if we can find that. Okay, this is a parcel. Just how as it came, right? There's you see one maybe two natural blues in the parcel. Now it's a beautiful piece there, but this is all what we call deluxe color. This is a very, very top color that you get. Now I'll show you one we did just the other day. We heated, there's a before and after. We did heat the rough. There's a few cracks in the stones in the rough now. Actually, we're lucky on this one. I think we lost 2 or 3 stones are cracked now. That they were clean before. But I just did this, show a presentation. So you can see the before color and the after color there. This is very medium colored material. It's actually quite reasonable in price. And then here's a crystal. Oh, there's the after. Okay, there's the before heating. Here's one that we a few years ago. I had this crystal, right? Not a great crystal. It got dropped and it broke in half. So I decided to heat half of it and leave the other half there, and I glued them back together. So that'll show you really good before and after. So, and let's see if we got some other, let's see, I didn't put a lot of pictures here. This is my first time of doing this, so I hope it's interesting enough. And let's see, let me scroll over to, there's that one, before and after, we've done that one. Okay, yeah, okay. So I don't know if it's going to be showing up on here well enough. Yeah. Okay, this is unheated. Tanzanite crystal.
Come a little closer. I can't hear you.
Okay, this is a unheated Tanzanite crystal. I don't know if you can see the color there. Really, actually, a really, really nice crystal. With probably 105 gram piece. We will probably heat this piece. People say don't heat it, but this thing's going to be so attractive after heating. I'll show you a piece that was that color before. And that's what the color of that piece will be after heating, approximately. So we sell these. We see also the heated ones, the blue ones, 10 to 1 over the natural ones. Every once in a while, somebody wants a natural color. And you do get a natural blue also, but that's extremely rare. You know, natural blue crystal.
All right. So have you any advice to anybody out there as to buying buyer beware and so on with regards to the buying Tanzanite? Because I've heard they're using cobalt treatments and things like this now to fake up existing Tanzanite crystals that aren't quite blue enough.
I haven't seen that actually. Okay, but it's possible. What I have seen, which was really interesting, I went to Marilani 10 days ago, and
You're roboting.
okay, about 10 days ago, I was in Marilani and looking at a parcel of property. Yeah, I think the microphone is on right now.
Got it.
No problem.
We're having a problem with background noise there, Steve.
Yeah, okay. So I looked at a parcel of rough in Marilani, and the guy was there. He was taking alcohol on it to take off the color they were. They're putting some type of ink on it right now to darken the color of the rough to make the presentation better. But he knew this. He was showing me that he was taking some alcohol and he was like rubbing in his fingers, and you could see this dark blue coming off on his fingers.
Yeah.
But that's not a permanent thing that, and if you're aware of that. And so I don't think they wouldn't do that on the crystals. I don't see that happening, but I'm sure there's always technology coming out there that they, potentially could do that. But from what I'm aware, other than putting this silly dye on it, that they're doing at the mines.
Well, between you and Peter Young out there, you guys are going where I would love to be. I would just kill to be in Marilani sometime and get a chance like Willow and Quentin and yourself had a chance to experience. So
Yeah.
my jealousy is, I'm also very grateful that you've taken some time today, Steve, because I know you're a very busy man, for sharing your knowledge with us about the treatments and the rough and the sort of percentages that are out there. Because a lot of people don't realize how few of the stones that are actually mined make it to the jeweler's table.
Correct,
So that are good enough. And so thank you for being the intermediary and turning some of these Cinderella stones from ugly to beautiful.
Well, thank
And,
you.
but
Thanks,
I add the one thing though, Steve, the one thing that puzzled me, and maybe you could help me about this, you were Quentin, the piece that I bought from that Tanganyika ferry captain, when it was heat treated, half of it took and half of it didn't. So half of it had sort of a grayish color and half of it had the ideal blue. So I'm not sure what was operating there. I for a long time, I thought it might have been some kind of twinning or something, but do you have any idea about that? Why one stone would have two different colors in it when it's treated?
I don't know if you want to talk there, Quentin, or I'll say what I feel. I think that you've got probably twinning there, but also you probably have that green component I talked about earlier in there. And the green does not do well on treating. It becomes kind of grayish blue, so it doesn't take the heating very well.
Yeah.
So when you have a piece that's, when you have actually a gem quality piece, the green can be kind of attractive in a crystal, not so much when a cut stone. But when, depends on the quality you can have. I've had pieces that when you heat them, they're not very attractive afterwards. And you're right, there's like grayish, greenish kind of, and that must be part of the piece.
I had them both cut because I thought it would be interesting educationally for people to see. Are there any, again, I'm being brave here, are there any other questions out there from anybody in the audience? You're welcome to ask them while Steve is here. You can unmute and ask a question if you have it. Anything in you'd like to ask.
Yeah, what's the difference between heating crystals versus heating rough? If if you prefer not to heat rough because of the chance of the stones cracking or breaking, what's different about heating crystals, or do they also end up cracking? It's just less important because they're not being faceted.
Michelle, that's a really, really good question. Okay, I think I can't explain exactly why. Maybe it's because it's more forgiving. You're heating a crystal. Most of them have inclusions that you see there, right? They may be expanding, but they're in there already, right? So they don't seem to notice. And I've never, honestly, all the crystals I've heated, the gemmier ones don't seem to crack, so much. And the ones that have quite a few inclusions, I can't even tell if they're getting more inclusions or not. So the clean ones, but I mean, between the rough that looks clean, I think it might be maybe because the surface is flat or it's not taking the heat. It's, maybe a piece of rough is taking the heat unequal. Answer your question, I don't know why exactly, but crystals don't seem to have the same reaction to heat as a piece of rough that's odd shaped.
Oh, that's really interesting. And thanks for your experience.
Yeah, but from my experience, I have no fear of heating, a clean crystal cracking, and and ones with inclusions don't seem to get worse.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Can I ask
Don't
a
know.
question, please? Thank you so much, Steve. Other than losing, like I think when you heat a tanzanite, you lose from trichroic to dichroic, I believe. But is there any other way to tell if it's heated or not? Thank you.
Well, I have never, all the pieces I've ever heated, other than you do get the green that doesn't change or the grayish, color, right? But when you heat it, you never get, you'll never have a brown color remaining unless it's a stain, like an iron type of iron stain. So when you're, now, we've had crystals. In fact, I have one with a water bubble inside of it. It actually has no brown whatsoever in it. So the water could not have survived in there if it was heated by man. Okay, so I believe the heating process on the natural blue occurs over millions and millions of years. Okay, I don't know. Clemens can probably tell more about that because he's got a little more knowledge there. But if you have any brown in the crystal or in the piece, right, you can. That's a definite. You'll say that's not heated. Okay. There's also a nuance in color, but see the natural ones also lose their trichrism a bit, quite a bit. They look really. It's hard to tell the difference. Only from experience you can tell this is natural and this is not, unless you see the brown component in there. But even, like I said, even the natural blue, like I showed you in that picture earlier, they will not show the trichrism like you'll get in other pieces. It won't be that strong.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions? Well, thank you, those in the audience who are brave enough to ask questions, because we need more of those. That's how we learn. And it expands on the information that we have received. Well,
Now,
thank you.
I wanted to add something else here
Yep.
about that. One of the crystals, I'd actually committed suicide on the way home when I brought it back. It was first time I ever had one break on me, and like very well wrapped, but a lot of cutting material in it. We took that thing apart and we ended up with about probably 6 different grades of color, including off the same crystal, including some natural blue parts.
Wow.
So they're not the piece isn't homogeneous either. So a lot of them are, and that's what I believe. I think the ground is heating them, and it tends to be towards the thinner areas that you get the natural blue, towards the tops of it. So I think it's absorbing the heat from the ground over millions of years. I think that's how you get natural blues.
Yeah. I'm sort of, having listened to Quentin's presentation on the rather strong physical activity that's involved in all the changes geologically in the area, that there must be, and probably are, some strains and pressure strains in the crystals that grew in that environment, so that sometimes that might be part of the reason why they crack under heat treatment, if they're the crystal and they're not been sort of trimmed and gotten rid of the pressure parts, the pressure damage and the inclusions that might cause for them to break.
Yeah, that's possible too. Yeah, it would be, okay, I'm going to bring another thing to processing. You don't mind me taking a couple of minutes?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so we process it now. Not a lot of people do this. They don't do this in Tanzania, but we process the material. We're taking a piece apart. We freeze it. Okay, actually, I soak it in water. We'll boil in water for a few minutes. Then we freeze it, and then we take boiling water. Okay, and we throw the piece in boiling water directly from the freezer. What happens? What happens is the frozen liquid, it penetrates the cracks, and it gives that just a little push on there, right? It loosens it up so that the parts of it that are the weakest, right, will break the easiest. So that those cracks it'll push it apart a little bit, just enough so when it's the easiest thing to trim them. Then you just tap it, piece comes apart where the cracks are, the path of the least resistance. So we get far better yield that way off of rough. I mean, it's amazing the rough yield we can get of rough material, clean material. And it sounds scary, but it's really, it's not.
It does, especially considering the amount of money you have to put into these
Oh
things.
yeah, but we take I'll use monetary terms. We took a crystal beam that I could sell for $6,000 and turned it into $15,000 worth of facet rough. So
So
that
your new
crystal-
name is the Gambler, is it?
yeah, well, that's another story.
Thanks again, Steve.
Okay, thank you very much, Ray, and I really appreciate you having me on here.
We're
And I
gonna
wanted to say,
move on.
yeah, really enjoyed this. Okay.
I hope you had fun. Yeah, and we're moving
did.
on to your buddy Clemens.
Yeah, all right, Clemens, how you doing?
I know these two guys were actually sharing a booth in München show.
Yeah.
So they know each other and
Yeah.
actually are customers of each other, I think.
We're
But
pretty good
just to
friends.
move on to our next present. Thanks, Steve. Sorry about
Thank you. You have a great day. Okay.
that. Okay, yeah, you have a great day too. Apparently one yesterday. Okay. Our next presenter has been with us before, and he's a good speaker. And when he speaks a little slower sometimes. You can hear everything he says. Dr. Clemens Schwarzenegger is an associate professor for chemistry at Johannes Kepler University in Linz, Austria. In 2016, he founded the Center for Scientific Gemology at the University of Linz and is scientific advisor for the Viennese Diamond Bourse. He is an owner of a small company which is dedicated to precision gemstone cutting and developing novel cut designs. In 2017, this is important because not a lot of academics know how to cut stones. And here's one that does well enough that in 2017, he won the US Fasteners Guild Singer Stone competition in the master category. That's something. And in 2018 and 2019, he was also certified as Grandmaster, and that's a very rarefied area. I know Stephen Kotlowski was in there, and very few others have gotten the Grandmaster designation, so kudos on that. His academic research interests in terms of gemology focus on the identification of gem treatments and mineral try that again. His academic research interests in terms of gemology focus on the identification of gem treatments and mineral chemistry, and particularly on the use of trace elements for origin determination of garnets and coloration of zoocytes/tanzanites, as well as advanced spectroscopy. So he's got lots of credits and he's very modest. He didn't even want me to tell you that. So without any further information, I'm going to introduce you and ask you to welcome Clemens Schwarzenegger, who's going to share with us his knowledge about cutting and orientation with this stone that has many different colors. And I always thought it was blue, just like people think sapphire is blue, but we're going to learn more. Please, Clemens, would you share your information with us?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Ray, and thank you for the first two speakers, or three speakers, in fact, for giving me so much profound information and so much reason to discuss. Because one of the questions that you always will be getting is this Tanzanite heated or not? Where does the color come from? And well, it is really, really interesting. Although that there has been a lot of research done on this topic, you won't find any clear evidence that says, okay, this element will be oxidized in heating and gives you this and that color. There are even some contradictory papers. Well, I try to add a little bit of my knowledge and my research and give you the first impressions of what we have been doing here for 2 years now, and show you a little bit on the colors of suicides or tanzanites. So let me start the screen sharing here. And where is it? Here is it. So I called it on the optical properties of zoisite and tanzanite, because, well, I had this discussion many times. If I call something either a zoisite or a tanzanite, you will have a couple of people who will come up to you and start to discuss, you know, this is not a tanzanite. Tanzanite, I read it in the literature, I've seen it on Facebook, a tanzanite must be blue. So you show them the crystal or the gem and say, okay, it's blue. Yes, it's a tanzanite. You turn it 90 degrees and it's not blue anymore. It might be brownish, greenish, whatever. And then you get the description, yeah, no, that's not the tanzanite anymore. So one and the same stone with two different faces. Really funny, but sometimes I get tired of explaining, so I choose to call them fancy zoisite, fancy tanzanite, or whatever the customer likes. So here is some nice overview of colors that can be found in natural zoisite, which is only mined in Merilani. So I'm not discussing anything that is not gem quality or that has not really the context of gemstones. We know some greenish material, we know some pinkish material, which is not gem quality. So these crystals and these, or the crystal fragments and these gemstones that you're seeing here are all mined from the Merilani mines. And I have to admit that most of the material comes from Steve. Thanks once again for giving me this nice material. So you see from purple to natural blue, these are all natural crystals. We have canary yellows, we have yellowish green, we have some brownish, we have peach colors, we have natural blues. And here I have to move myself to the side so that I can see my own presentation here. Here I've tried to bring you a selection of different colors that I have in my collection. And it starts from really almost colorless, going down the yellow grades from dirty brownish yellow, greenish yellow into this canary yellow. We have peach colors going into the pink, and here's some purple. We have the greens, and we have the modern ones, the what I would call very Perry. This is this year's color of the year by Pantone. We have the bluish, we have this mermaid, and we have the intense, deep, clear blue crystals. Now, if I would ask you to give me an idea of how many of these have been heated, well, most people would probably say, yes, these two have been heated because these are the dark blues. In fact, this one is heated, this is unheated. And there's a second one, this slightly bluish purple one is also heated. Everything else here is unheated, especially the pinks and the greens. They should give you a good idea that those crystals have not, or these gems have not been heat treated, because the yellowish component and also the pink component will in most cases be gone after heating. Not in all cases. There is also some chance to have pinks surviving the heat. Steve, that would be interesting for you. We can heat pinks to keep them pink. But the question is, why would you do so? Because they're pink anyways. So in order to understand what's going on, we have to do a little bit of theory. We have to do a little bit of crystal field chemistry. And you probably know from previous talks that what we need is some elements, some impurity elements that give us the color in some materials like the gems. And the elements that are here in question are the so-called D elements. So they have these the electrons in D shells. And if everybody is thinking of atoms having the shells and the electrons are floating in these shells, this is a nice idea to explain some things, but unfortunately it is not true. So what we need to describe the electrons is the orbitals. And the orbitals, especially the d orbitals, have these weird shapes that we see here. So 5 different shapes for the 10 possible d electrons. And we have here the oxygen that form an octahedron. And inside this octahedron, we have now one of these d block elements. And let's have a look, for example, at these, one of my favorite orbitals, the DZ squared orbital. Thanks for introducing the Z. For me as a European, it's always strange that people call it a C. So this orbital has now a probability that the electrons are within this blue shape. And you see that this oxygen here and this oxygen here are very close to these handles. I would call them. And therefore, they are pressing or reflecting the electrons from being in here, because here we have a negative charge, here we have negative charge. So they have a higher energy. And the same holds true for a couple of others. Either they squeeze in between the oxygens, or they're pointing directly towards the oxygen atoms. And this leads an D element, which has 5 equal energetically equal levels as a free ion, to split up the energy levels, because some stand in between the oxygens and some directly in the direction of the oxygens. And this splitting of the energy levels here, this is now what causes the color, because having light coming in, absorbing the energy from an electron, or the energy is absorbed by an electron. So the electron is pushed up in a higher level orbital, and we have the absorption of the light of these specific energy. And this specific energy can be in the light, in the visible light range, and then we see the color. Now, this is one of the reasons why we do see color when we have certain elements like chromium, vanadium, copper in some cases. There are a couple of 5, 6 typical elements, vanadium, titanium, that cause color in most of the minerals. And now we have something that even makes it more complicated in Tanzanite, because if we look at the Tanzanite, we have here a view on the crystal structure on 3 different axes. We look here down from the A axis, we see here the silicon tetrahedrons, we have the oxygen octahedrons, and the A positions are where the calcium is sitting in. And if you look down from the B axis or from the C axis, you see 3 completely different pictures. And these octahedrons now, they are compressed, they are not symmetrically. So it means the energy that one and the same element has in one or the other direction to absorb the light may be different. So that means we have one element which has a different direction, a different distance to the oxygen atoms, will absorb a different amount of energy, and therefore we see different colors. And this is what makes it a little bit more complicating in these tanzanites or zoisites, that they have really 3 distinct different colors, or they may have 3 distinct different colors in all 3 crystal axis directions. Now, it's better than explaining in theories, of course, viewing something like this. And what is best used to view this trichrism is something like a computer screen. If you have a computer screen and put some white background on it, your computer screen has polarized light, which means the light does not go in every direction, but just in one direction. And therefore, you only have the interaction with one of the colors inside your trichroic gem. So what I do is here, I have a nice piece of rough here. I use the large one because it's easier to show. And I just turn it in front of the monitor and you see the different colors. We start here with brownish, you turn it by 90 degrees and you get a nice purple. The same purple if you just turn it another 90 degrees. And here you have the third color, which is blue. If you turn it to the third side, you start again with this honey brown. And here we have the perfect blue. So these are the colors that you see. And now the big question for GemCutter is, how do I get the best face-up color in the final stone? Again, we just need to look a little bit in the theory. This is the design of a more or less Escher, modified Escher cut. And let's have a look at the ray tracing. So ray tracing, or in fact, reverse ray tracing, is that we look at the ray of light. It penetrates into the stone, gets reflected, and then reflected out of the gem again. And here is the color that we see. So if we assume that this axis here is the blue axis, then we start here entering the zone and we see that we increase the color depth. We increase the depth of the blue color in this direction. Then we get a reflection. And now we follow the second axis, which is the golden axis, and we catch up some golden, which is mixed into the blue. But here it's just a short path, and then again, a long way up to increase the blue again. So we have approximately well, let's say 80% in the blue direction and 20% in the yellow or golden direction. So this ray will face up as blue. If we look at more or less the same, but in an orthogonal direction, which means we turn the ray 90 degrees, then we have again the blue going through. Then we have the reflection here in the third axis, which is now the purple axis, and then going up the blue again. So in this case, we might see a shade of green, and here we might see a shade of purple, but still mostly blue. Now, if we have a ray that goes in at one of the corners, then it cannot penetrate as deep into the stone because it hits one of the facets, gets reflected, has a long transmission now into a mixture of the yellow and the purple, which makes it a little brownish, dirty. This is the typical diesel color that we see. And then it goes up again in the blue direction. In this case, the blue is not that intensive, not that intense, and we have much more of these brown, mostly dirty color. So you have to take everything of this into account. You have to take into account your design, how your ray traces will interact within the stone. You have to take into account the orientation of the stone. And of course, you want to have some yield. A lot of things to play with. Well, let's have a look how I did on exactly the sample where we showed the diagram before. And one thing that works really, really nicely with Tanzanites is doing photography with polarization. Polarization, again, you have the light just going in one direction and you can eliminate a secondary color. And in this case, we have here two photos on the with the polarization used, 90 degrees and 0 degrees. We have a nice golden color, we have a nice purple color. And here to the right, you see the actual photo, how the stone faces up in natural light without any polarization. So you see we have dominating the purple, but we get some yellow mixed in, so we get some green, and this is what many people then call as mermaid color or mermaid stones. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit on the reason for coloration. And the reason, as I told you, are the elements. And the elements, and this might explain a couple of questions that we had already today. These elements are not distributed evenly within a crystal. You always start at some point with a saturated solution of whatever is inside, the crystal grows and the solution gets depleted of one element. But maybe a second element can take this place, and therefore you have a gradient of elements that are not really in the suicide, but they are in the ppm range. So parts per million or maybe a couple parts per thousand, typically way below 1%. And they might influence not directly the color, but they might influence the properties when heating the material. And therefore you have a uniform color before heating, and then you have something like bicolor after heating, or the other way around. So in the material that I have lying here around, I have bicolors of dry colors, many, many different pieces, and we have screened them. In most of the cases, it's not the heat that makes it bicolor, it's the chemistry. Because you have a gradient going from one element to the other, and those interact different with light. So let's start with the easiest of all cases, with the almost colorless suicide. To explain here, on the right, we have what you typically see in a publication. This is an absorption spectrum, which means we have here the wavelengths from 300 to 800 in most cases. The visible range is approximately from 400 to 780. And what we see here is the higher the y-axis value is, the more we have absorption of this light. No light goes through here. So this is a little bit hard to understand for most people. So we can convert this to transmission, which is more or less the inverse, which means that where we have zero transmission, we do not get any light through. The more we have transmission, the better light gets through. So in this case, we have absorption in the ultraviolet range, and through all of the visible range, we have more or less uniform transmission. Therefore, it's almost colorless with a slight yellow tinge. Let's have a look at how these spectra look like in the perfect blue Tanzanite. Of course, this perfect blue Tanzanite, I told you at the beginning, this is one of the tools that was heated, started in the diesel color. So we have this strong brownish yellow, and after heating, we get this perfect blue. Can we have a look at the chemistry that's going inside? Just to give you a rough estimation, most people know that Tanzanite is typically high in vanadium. We have 1400 ppm, that's 0.14% of vanadium inside. And this vanadium is known to make the color somehow. Not sure in which electron state it is. Is it oxidized, reduced to heating? This is still some discussion here. We have a certain amount of titanium, not too high. In this one, we have a rather high amount of chromium. Strontium is something that's also very typical. If you have calcium inside, you have all these bivalent cations like strontium, magnesium. We have low manganese, we have low iron. So the chemistry says, okay, what we see must be very highly related to the vanadium. And we have a look at the spectra here on the left side. We see before the heat treatment, we see there is a little transmission window here in the greenish part and here in the reddish part, and mostly low energy in the yellow. So this is what makes up the yellow. The question might arise why we do have three spectra, because we have collected the spectra in different directions. Very often in scientific, mineralogical scientific literature, you will see a perfect alignment along the axis. They determine the A, the B, the C axis and measure all the spectra. In our case, we had mostly rough pieces, so you don't have any crystal faces, and we just orientated them in a couple of different directions and measured with different polarization. Therefore, we also have more spectra, typically 9 to 12 spectra for one piece of rough. And then based on the results, we collected the different angles or the different axis colors. And we see here that most of them look completely different. Only one has a very high absorption here in this bluish region. So after heating this material to 550 degrees centigrade, in my case, I use a reducing or a little bit reducing atmosphere. So I put them, instead of the jewelry investment, I put them in charcoal. And if the charcoal gets heated in the presence of oxygen, it produces carbon monoxide, and this carbon monoxide might reduce a couple of elements. And we see that we have one band here. I hope you can see it. I can't see it because here is my speaker's window in the range of about 750 nanometers. We have two bands here at 600 and 530, and we have one at 380. And what is the big difference? We have now here a transmission at 440, which is perfectly in the blue range. And you see, this makes the color. There's also transmission here a little bit in the reddish part. This makes the violet modifier. In this case, there's a huge difference between these two because this is a logarithmic scale. So we only see the blue with our naked eyes. And also there's a transmission here, 340 nanometers. This is in the ultraviolet. This is interesting for scientific purposes, but we don't see it with our eyes. So you see the difference between these two stones is we create here a strong transmission window in the blue, and this is in all directions in this case, because we have mostly only the vanadium present. So it is very hard to describe colors, and if 5 people are looking at the same stone, especially if it's a red stone, you will get 5 or even more answers because some people can't decide which color they should call this. We have a system that is called LAB, system of colors, and just to explain it, we have an A-axis, we have a B-axis, and these two make the mix of colors. So from the A-axis, we go from blue to yellow, and in the B-axis, we go from green to red. And the L-axis is more or less the color intensity. So we have here 4 points that were before heating. That's the yellow one. And you see we have one that is strongly in the yellow direction. We have a value of about 30 in the B-axis, which means it's really almost yellow, what we see here. And we also have one that's almost at 0. So this is brownish, grayish, dirty color. And after heating, all these 4 points are mostly or almost in the same place, and they shift in towards the blue direction. So what we have now is a change from the yellow to the blue, and it looks like that we have 4 different colors before heating of course, it's 3 different colors and one is a mix. And it looks like we have only one color after heating. And this is also something that I'm just postulating here. Maybe George Rossman can correct me. Many people say that the trichroism is lost and you end up with a dichroic stone. In fact, this cannot be true, at least to my understanding, because we do not change the crystal structure. The crystal structure is still different from all 3 directions. What we do is we kill one of the color centers or one of the color reasons, which is not visible anymore. So we do only see 2 of the colors, but still the system should be trichroic, like in topaz. In topaz, you see 2 colors, but it's still trichroic because you have 3 different crystal axes. And the length of the crystal axis stays the same, no matter how much heat you treat, unless you destroy the crystal structure, but then that's a different story. So out of many, many crystals, I've tried to give you here an overview of a couple that are more or less easy to understand because they only have simple UV vis spectra, like these canary yellow ones. You see here we have only one band at 445, which defines the colors. It blocks all of the blue, and we have a strong transmission here in the yellow, and we have a small absorption in the red part. So this is what perfectly matches with this wonderful yellow color. And now we check the chemistry, and we see that we have the highest level of titanium. So this band is due to titanium, and titanium causes the yellow color. We have almost no vanadium here. If you compare this to the more than 1000 ppm that we had before, this is 80, this is almost nothing. We have almost no chromium. Strontium is present but does not have any influence on the color. We have low manganese, we have low iron. So the only chromophore that we have here is the titanium, and the titanium makes this wonderful band here, which is easily identifiable. If we go to the greens, so the greens, Steve already told us they might leave some unpleasant color after heating. In fact, they might, but it's not a must because there are different reasons for green coloration. And let's start with the one that we have already seen with the titanium. We have a piece of rough. Again, I used my computer screen to get the 2 different color orientations. Here we have the same view. One is the purple, one is the green. And from the green, we see the spectra. We have the 445, which is due to titanium, but we also have the vanadium 385 and here the other ones. So this leaves us with a green transmission here in the green area. If we turn the stone by 90 degrees or we turn the polarized light by 90 degrees, we see the purple and we see the spectrum looks completely different. Remember, the chemistry is the same no matter how I turn the stone. The titanium is here as well, but in this direction, the titanium does not absorb that much light as it does here. Therefore, the spectrum looks a little bit different. Now, what happens if we heat this material? Or let's first have a look at the chemistry. We have a high concentration of titanium. This is what we see here. We have very high vanadium, nice isolated peak, low chromium, low manganese, iron almost nothing, and strontium typical levels. And this is if you cut the stone. You get the green and you get a little bit of purple at the ends because we have this long transmission path here for the light, which picks up the purplish color. This is exactly from the piece of rough I showed you before. And before heating, there is the second reason. Sorry, I got a little bit confused here. There's a second reason for having green suicides. It's the option 1 is we have titanium and we have vanadium in high concentrations. And the other options, we have chromium. So we know chromium creates nice green in emeralds. And here we have a rather similar surrounding for the chromium. And we have here 340 ppm of chromium. It's not that high that we have in the vanadium, for example. This is more than enough. We have a certain amount of vanadium, which mixes a little bit into the color. Titanium, everything else doesn't play a role. And these bands that we see here, they have all been assigned to chromium. These guys, Javier Cayata, they did the study. And if you look closely, you can also see here, there's a small amount of negative peak, I would say. This is the luminescence of the chromium, the two lines at 780. And even if you use a blue laser or UV light, you will see that these stones have some sort of red fluorescence. And if you have a zoisite that is colored by chromium, you can heat it whatever temperature you want, it stays the same. The difference is if we have the mixed greenish, this one has a little bit more yellow, we have a more pronounced titanium band here, high titanium, high chromium, everything else is ridiculous. Heat it to 550 degrees and it turned to a nice bright blue, not very intense, not very deep, because the chromium is still a moderate level. And what we see here in the spectrum, our titanium band is now gone. We have a transmission here in the blue. We have the transmission here in the ultraviolet range, and everything else looks like a typical spectrum of heated tanzanite. Now, what happens? The titanium changes its oxidation state and the band is removed. And also here, this strong absorption that we have at 340 nanometer is removed, and we create this transmission window here exactly in the blue range. What you see here in the 1600 nanometers region is probably an OH band, which is very nice because it shows you if your spectra are correctly aligned, because this is only visible in one direction. So we have the two different greens. Either you have a mix of blue and yellow, which creates green. If you heat it, it turns blue. Or you have the chromium green, which stays constant. And this is probably what creates the problems when heating the greenish gray material. Again, here I tried to visualize this with the LAB color system. Unheated, you see one point here is at above 75 in the B axis. So this is really, really extremely yellow. The others are one already in the purplish region. This is in the brownish. And after heating, they all move together into the blue direction without too much difference depending on the ratios. Also, you can see a change in the L parameter. So the 70, the blue ones, is a little bit lighter than the yellowish green was before. Yeah, we already talked about pinks. Pinks are, at least to my understanding, amongst the rarest colors that you can find in zoisite. And one of the reasons is also because the pink coloration is typically on the thin side of the crystal. So if you have the crystal, you have to cut it here on the thin side, because if you turn it 90 degrees, it's not pink anymore. You have to be very careful when orienting this material. And out of analysis, you just sort your material after the highest concentration of the elements. And if you sort them by manganese, the ones that are pink always have very high concentrations of manganese. And this manganese has a couple of typical bands, the 525 that we have here, and also another one that can be assigned to manganese. And these two spectra are from two different pieces. The one here is the piece that I cut. This is really a nice dark pink in daylight. It's very hard to photograph because the light temperature kills a lot of the real color that the stone has. And this is the other one. This is the piece of rough, which has these two bands here. I've never seen anything that intense pink here. Unfortunately, it's not fuzzy rough. It's just too cracked inside. And the numbers here are from this piece. So we have very high manganese. We have very, very low vanadium, which would cause a blue coloration. Therefore, we would end up in the purple. And depending on the direction here, we have two different directions. Also, not much of a change in the directions you view this material. And understanding the chemistry and the reason for the coloration also explains why you should never heat this material, because manganese is easily reduced when heating, and when it's reduced, then it's colorless. So we know the same from morganites, for example, a couple of tourmalines. And if you heat this material, you just destroy the manganese 4, you create manganese 2, and the color is gone. In many cases, blue will remain because you have vanadium. In this case, it will probably render the crystal almost colorless. And then there is one other example, very low titanium, that we have no yellow component. We have vanadium, chromium, we have some manganese. So manganese and vanadium, we have a mix of pink and blue, which creates this violet. And you see it here on the left side, this is before heating, and the right side, this is after heating. This is the spectra from one direction before heating and after heating. And you see, it doesn't change a lot. And we have here also another direction, even in the second direction. There's a little bit of a change here. We create in the ultraviolet range this small transmission window, but the rest is almost the same. And this is now where I have to be the bad guy again, the scientist, to say, you will, at least in my opinion, you will never be able to say 100% sure that a piece has not been heated. You might say for certain pieces that they have been heated, because if I understand the chemistry and the UV vis spectra, then I can say, okay, if it has a high content of titanium and doesn't have the titanium band, it must have been heated. But if it doesn't contain this, if it only has, for example, vanadium, the heating doesn't change anything. So you cannot tell if it's heated or not, but in some cases you can tell this must have been heated, for example. Yeah, to summarize, well, Tanzanite or zoisite comes in almost every color. I've had pieces of orange, I've had pieces of red, really everything that even sapphires can have. Heating can improve the color, but it not always does. If you have the pink, if you heat it, you lose lots of money. Steve can tell me. Good cutting can separate the colors instead of mixing them. And this is very, very important if you want to have clear colors, if you want to avoid some overtones or bicolors. The work that I've presented here is the result of screening more than 1,000 pieces of rough. We have done 218 chemical analysis via laser ablation ICP-MS to get the trace elements. This is above 70 samples, always measuring more samples per one specimen to rule out some outliers. We have recorded 1,100 UV vis spectra, which is about 120 samples in different orientations. And of course, cutting and heating a couple of those. And this work cannot be done by one man alone. Even it took me 2 years. I have to give big thanks to Steve Wolotowski, who gave me a lot of material to work on, and he gave it to me for free. And I have to thank my student, Lena Graf, who was the one who was measuring, well, at least 1,000 out of the 1,100 UV vis spectra. Yeah, but there was one thing I think I have forgot. What happened to the big rough I showed you the pleocruism so nicely on? Well, of course, I cut it. Here I have mounted it on the top, and to show you the orientation, this is one axis is the perfectly blue, and the other one is the brownish. I had to mount it on the violet axis, so the violet axis is along this direction here, because of there was one inclusion that was more or less killing the yield. So the crystal started out, or the fragment started out at 181 carats. And then it went to the butcher and I put some facets on, showed you here some nice cutting here after polishing. Here you can see the bubble, this little nasty inclusion that killed the yield a little bit, that prevented it of going over 100 carats. And here the table, and after polishing the table before removing. Well, and this is how it turned out. This is an 81 carat unheated Tanzanite. You see it has a nice brownish color. It has flashes of blue and yellow. Unfortunately, people did not appreciate this when I sent it to the US to show a couple of people. And when it already was in the US, well, I said, hey, Steve, put it in the oven and make it blue for me. And this is what it turned out finally. And it is a very, very intense blue. It has some purple tones in them because it's not perfectly aligned to the blue axis. We have a little tilt to the purple. In my opinion, it's a very nice color. Some people say they would prefer the pure blue, but well, as always, you have to make sacrifices. Either you want to have a large stone or you have to have a couple of perfectly blue stones, and I decided for a nice blue color with violet modifier, large stone. And with this, I want to thank you, and I'm open for any discussion, and I hope I can answer most of the questions. Also, I'm sure I cannot answer all of them. So thank you for listening to me.
Hey, any questions, anybody? So clearly orientation and the chromophores that are present in the stone will govern the part of the rainbow that the finished product sits in when you're looking at the stone tanzanite. And I find this amazing because for the longest time I thought tanzanite was blue, and clearly it's far more than that. So thanks to the scientific contributions from Clemens and also the geologic contributions from Quinton and the gemological contributions from Willow, and of course the science slash industrial knowledge that came from Steve. So as a group, I think we've educated you perhaps more than you were before you started, and that's our goal. And thank you all for attending and for the questions you did offer. So just so you know, in 2002, AGTA took it upon themselves to change the December birthstone to Tanzanite. So even though this is a stone that has perhaps only a 30-year lifespan beyond today, and they're taking out 2.65 million carats a year, it's going to disappear. So I'm not saying hoard, but I'm saying if you like what you see, you may want to get a few while you still can, and talk to people like Steve and Clemens to see if you can access them. It's a worthy stone. It's a beautiful stone. So next month, on the last Sunday of the month, which is the 27th, that's February 27th, we're going to be, I'm trying to gather experts on spodumene, which is hiddenite and all those other interesting spodumene gems. And I think that thanks to the unsettled nature of Afghanistan, where some of the best spodumene in the world have come from, this might prove to be a very interesting gem for us all to learn about, because it comes from a great number of places in the world, including California and other places in Brazil and so on. So I'm hoping that some people amongst you who will know someone or some people who will be expert enough and interesting enough to share their knowledge with us on spodumene. And I do hope you'll tell your friends and join us on the 27th. And I want to thank the gentleman that is in the background who will now become visible, I hope, is Julian. He is a man of extreme dedication to this hobby, both gemologically and mineralogically, being the host for both the Mindat and the gemdat.org sites. So thank you, Julian, for making things work here. And thank you all for attending. And I hope you have a great Sunday. And those who are in Tucson, I'm jealous. I hope you find the stone of your dreams. And have a good day, and hope you keep well until next month when we get together again.
Do we have time for a few more questions?
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Yeah, I'd like to ask either Steve or Clemens to comment on the following. I've received a number of tanzanites that are blue in color, and the people that provided them said they were all exposed on the ground, exposed to sunlight. And the thought was that they were photochemically bleached from the brown to the blue. Any thoughts on this?
I haven't tried anything with high intensity UV, but with normal UV, I have not noticed anything because I think the energy is not high enough. Because
Steve,
what is going on is
yourself.
clearly an oxidation reduction reaction. So you have, I forgot the direction because there's so much contradictory literature. You have a vanadium and the titanium reaction, and either it's going from 4 to 5 or from 5 to 4. And I don't think that is possible with UV.
You have something to say, Steve?
I haven't seen any difference if it's close to the surface, on the ground, or
You have to come closer to the mic.
I'm sorry. I haven't seen any difference of material that was mined close to the surface or deeper down. In fact, I think it seems as they've gone deeper, I've seen more natural blue from than I've seen near the surface. So I don't see that being something that actually is occurring.
And the original find was on the surface and it was blue. Actually the prospector that tried to market it and develop it and did mine it was originally thinking he was dealing with sapphire until other researchers in various centers proved otherwise.
Yeah. I wonder actually if that the material they found on the surface wasn't as they said there was by a fire, right? That they had a fire there, and maybe they were cooking, roasting some meat or something. Okay, out there. I wonder if that may have occurred because I don't see the valleys that are very shallow are actually producing more brown than the ones that are deeper, in my experience.
Anyone else with questions? Well, thank you all for attending. We're going to sign off now. Leave it to Jolian to sign us off. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ray, and everybody.
And in particular, thank you to our presenters.
Clemens, I'll have to talk some more with you sometime offline on the topic. I got a lot of questions and a lot of observations that we would have fun discussing.
Me too. I was thinking of sending you a mail a couple of weeks already, and maybe we can have a talk because this is a topic I'm not very much into the UV vis interpretation. This is too much physics for me.
Yep.
And I have gathered all these data and we have so much materials available. And I think it would be a shame or a waste of time not to publish an article. And therefore, I would like to ask you, maybe you could help me in interpreting this material.
Yeah, no, I got a lot of data. I got a lot of spectra on my website, a lot of things I haven't put up there yet. And I'm particularly going to take question about the titanium interpretation. The wavelength of that band is right where iron titanium intervalence occurs. And titanium 4, of course, is D0. It's not going to give any color. And titanium 3 is incredibly rare in nature, in geological. Maybe the sapphires from Tibet, maybe the sapphires from Mount Carmel might have it. That's still debatable. But other than that, except for extraterrestrials, there's just no example of titanium 3 in planet Earth. So the iron titanium intervalence interaction to me sounds more viable, given the fact it's right at the correct wavelength.
This is why I would ask you to help me interpret this.
Okay.
But titanium is definitely one of the reasons. And I've seen the titanium. Well, yeah, you don't need a lot of ppm of the iron, which we know from the sapphire, but it must be very, very effective then, because the titanium is extremely high and iron is, I think it's below 100 ppm in most of the cases.
That'd be fine though for sapphire in an aluminum site, for example.
Yeah.
Are you in European time at the moment, or are you in the US?
No, unfortunately, I'm not in Tucson. I'm sitting here at home.
Okay, so we can try
I didn't
some
want
morning.
to take the risk to fly and get stuck somewhere.
Right. We can try some morning my time, which would be noontime, roughly your time.
Yeah, I'll send you an email tomorrow.
Okay.
That we can make.
Are you coming? Are you going to be in Tucson? Are you in Tucson?
No, the week of Tucson, the next couple of weeks are the very heaviest teaching load I have of the entire year.
So you won't be making it out?
So I'm not going to make it out. Sometimes I make it out on Saturday for the industrial, for the business conferences, but I got 5 4-hour classes to give the next several weeks.
Okay. Well, looking forward to seeing you, but maybe I'll see you another time.
Right.
That's the
I've worked
good
on a
thing
bunch of
about
Steve
European.
stuff over the years also. But
That's the
I
good
do
thing
have
about
a
the
lot of,
European universities. We have off the whole February.
oh, good.
Semester starts in March here.
Okay. Did anybody do any work upon the um, the material from, let's see, get the locality here real quickly. From Sugar Valley, Pakistan?
I have not had the pieces in my hand. I know Laura has a couple of pieces.
Yeah, they don't have the nice, beautiful blue color, but the one I'm sharing right now is very typical of the ones that I've worked with in the different polarization colors. And that's the only other locality I know where you get more or less gem quality zoisite that comes in things sort of approaching some of the zoisites.
Mm.
Steve, have you dealt with the material from Asia?
Yeah, actually, I've when there was quite a good production, must be 20 some odd years ago. We used that material. We even tried heating it and treating it, nothing happened.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
I think I have a couple pieces still left in my collection. Wait, the interesting thing, I never even took pictures of it. This last trip, John Saul's collection, I managed to get 3 pieces of Kenya Tanzanite, very, very deep, rich blue color.
Closer to the mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, keep doing that. I managed to get on this last trip from John Saul's collection. I managed to get actually through Mark Saul some pieces from Kenya that were mined in Kenya a long time ago, and there was production of Tanzanite in Kenya along with Savarite, but they found it was very small production of the material. But that was natural. The material was natural, very, very deep blue purple color.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
stuff I got from Bridges, there's some little bits of blue mixed in with all the rough.
Right,
The crushed rough of the
exactly. So it
Savarite.
does occur in Kenya. So would that be Kenyanite?
I don't get into these nomenclature issues.
I know, I'm joking with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see, just show you one of the yellow ones I have here, screen share. Again, they got very nice pleochroism. Even though it's a yellow crystal to begin with, they have the green component in the C direction. Have you worked on those, Clemens?
Is this one Marilani?
Stand by here to get the exact locality. It's Marilani Hills, yes.
Yeah, we had a couple of those in the collection. And you have here, this is the typical example where we have the yellow and the blue mixing into the green.
Okay, yeah, makes
in
sense.
contrast to the chromium, I just by accident acquired a collection, and there was one green Tanzanite inside, one green zoisite inside. You cannot compare this with the other greens that we see. It's extremely intense, this chromium green.
Yeah, I don't have any really good chromium ones that show the deep green, unfortunately, but it certainly makes sense. This is good. The first time all 3 of us have been together. I'm glad we're doing this.
That's awesome. Good to see you, George.
Would be much better sitting together in Tucson with a beer.
I know, I'm here in Tucson. It's good. The weather's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life treats you wonderful, Steve.
Life is good.
I'm sure you have a nice girl on the left or the right of you.
Maria's here. Hello,
Maria.
Pick me out because I don't even know how to do this computer stuff, like to put the pictures up or anything. So she assisted me.
There she is.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, okay, well.
Okay.
I'm gonna go. Get some business done here.
Yeah.
And good to see you guys, both of you guys. Really, really nice to see you. You know, I'm sorry you couldn't make it down here, but you know.
Next time.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So let's stay in contact and have a nice day over there. And I'm going to bed now.
Okay. Yeah. Have a good rest. Okay. Thanks, Clemens.
Goodbye.
All right.
Thank
you all.